Okay, Joan, well thanks very much for two things. Obviously give us the interview, but also allowing us to record in this beautiful place. So before we talk about here, maybe if you could go right back to your own family and tell us a little bit about your family roots, how you ended up in Dungarvan and all that kind of stuff.
Well, my mother and father met each other and got married and lived in Dungarvan. My father was from Dungarvan and his father was from Dungarvan, but before that the generation of Welches came from Ballinamult area. So my grandmother, my father's mother, is buried out there in Ballinamult Church, and my mother was from Kilgobnet, which is 4 miles outside Dungarvan on the hills facing south, and it's a lovely place, and if we look out the window here we can see it. It's just, the house is still there and it's nestling in the hills above the church in Kilgobnet.
And what was her family name?
Her family name was Devine, and Ireland's fittest family. It's the same Devine family.
Good.
And so she had lots of sisters and 2 brothers, Nicholas and Mackie. He was the eldest and he inherited the farm and he never married. And then her sisters, one became a nurse in England and she worked right through the war, World War II in London, and 2 of her sisters married farmers. The third married a farmer as well, and he also was one of the milk suppliers in Dungarvan. His name was Tommy Kern, so that was Auntie Hannah's husband. And then my father was Paddy Welch, and the Welches of Dungarvan were very well known, and his family had the pub in the Quay, which is now the Anchor, but we still call it Welches the Quay sometimes when we're talking among the family. So that was a lovely old pub to go to.
So she married into the pub then?
No, she didn't. My grandfather's brother had the pub.
Oh, right, okay.
But you know, it was a place where the family, you know, always looked to, and it was a really nice place. So I remember that from my childhood, and I remember the flagstones on the ground as you went in, and I remember the snug into the right. And if I was sent down there on a message from my home, which was 2 blocks up the street, I'd go there with the basket and knock at the hall door, and Mrs. would give me, you know, 2 small bottles or whatever to bring home. But that was the way things were then. Dungarvan was a wonderful place to grow up. I grew up, I was born in the very late 1940s, so I was growing up in the 50s and early 60s in Dungarvan, and you know, for the years between, I suppose, 12 and 14 or 15, the town was my playground. I was old enough not to have to go out holding my mother's hand, so my friends and I used to play in the castle. So that was a very nice place to play. King John's Castle was our playground, and we used to call it a crypt, but it was, I don't know if it wasn't underground, but it was under the garden. There was a garden upstairs there, which was quite unusual, and the crypt had a vaulted ceiling, and it was where the guards, if they found abandoned bicycles, they used to leave them in there until they were claimed. But we used to love going in there too, and there weren't any windows in it, just the door, so it was quite a magical place to be in. And in those days, a lot of people went to morning mass and evening devotions, and I used to go to morning mass, but sometimes we wouldn't go to evening devotions. We'd maybe go to the crypt or go, you know, but it was absolutely wonderful. And we used to play squash in the courtyard of King John's Castle. Since then, the concrete has been taken from the wall and it's been brought back to its natural state of stone. But in those days, it was concreted, plastered, and so it was suitable for squash.
Good for squash.
Yeah, it was a great big high wall. It was wonderful.
And what did your dad do? What was his job?
My father worked for the Urban Council, as it was known at the time, and he was rent and rates collector. And he died when I was 16. So that was a blow, because I was the eldest of 3. So Thomas and Patricia and me, I'm Joan. And so it was tough on my mother in those days. But
was that sudden death?
No, he died of cancer. But you know, it might, maybe it could be cured now, but in that time it couldn't. He was sick for he was sick for. It started 2 years before he died, and then he went back to work for 6 months, and then, you know, he had to retire then due to ill health. And when he died, he was involved with the brass band. He was secretary of the brass band, Dungarvan Brass and Reed Band, as it was called then. And when he died, the band accompanied his body in the coffin in the hearse up the street to the church, and they played the Dead March. You know, I don't know of anybody else who had that honour, but the fact that he was with the band for so long, and he used to transcribe the music onto the blank manuscripts with just the lines and the spaces. He couldn't read music, but he could copy, and he could just do it. You know, he was very neat, and he had very good handwriting as well. So that was something about my father. And my mother nursed. She had great nursing skills, and she was in England, but she came home before. I don't know if she came home after World War II started. I think she came home, and she met my father, and then they were married. So.
Now, what did she do after he died?
Well, she was bringing us up. You know, she was a wonderful housekeeper, and her sisters were all around her. There was one in Waterford, and the other 3 were around Dungarvan, 2 in Colligan, and Auntie Hannah was in the All Road in Bay Villa, and her sister Daisy was in Waterford, Daisy Garrigan, and she was a matron in Waterford. There was a small maternity hospital in Waterford. The name escapes me, but she was there. Oh no, it was before Airmont.
Oh, right, okay.
Something Street. But anyway, she was there. So she used to come up regularly to our house, and her husband, we called him Uncle Owen Garrigan. And so that there were always lots of visitors in and out of our house.
And financially, was it tough after your father died?
Oh, of course it was, yeah, because my father wasn't in his job long enough to get the contributory pension. So it was tough, but my mother was a great housekeeper, and she was well able to take care of us, and we weren't wanting for anything. And then she had the support of her sisters as well, so that was great. You know, she had the moral support. That was wonderful. And my father's sisters lived near as well. He had 3 sisters, so they were there for us, Nora and Mary. And my father had a sister also who was a nurse in England, and she came back and she nursed in Lismore in the hospital there. And then when Ardkeen opened, she was one of the first nurses to nurse in Ardkeen, the new Ardkeen Chest Hospital, as it was called then, and she continued nursing there until she retired. And so she married and she lived in Slieve, but they didn't have any children.
And you were talking about your early memories. I mean, what was your memory of running around Dungarvan as a child? I presume, for example, in Grattan Square, there'd be a lot of activities going on, where it'd be the fair and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
the fair in Dungarvan was held on the 3rd Wednesday of every month, and it was a magic place. After school, you'd be allowed to go down the square to the fair. Would still be going on. You know, some of the animals would have been sold by then, but there was still the magic of the cows and the splattering, and a lot of the shops put up shutters on the windows, half shutters on the windows, so they came halfways up the windows, because, you know, there was cows and there was pigs and everything, and the sounds and the banter of the farmers, you know. And of course I was, you know, looking up at cows, and it was different, because in those days too, you know, I remember a cousin of my mother's referring to, it was the eve of a fair. You know, so that's how important the fairs were, and the eve of a fair, getting the animals ready to have them loaded up in the morning and have them into the fair in time to get a good spot in the fair as well. So the square and some of the streets off the square were open to the fair, and it was great. And they also had people selling machinery and selling spanners. Now, what do I have to do with spanners? Nothing. But I used to love looking at these men and telling you what you could do with the spanner, and you know, and people used to stand in awe, and then people would buy them. But I loved all that drama. That was his first street theatre, if you liked. And then, of course, there was the man in the straitjacket who used to come sometimes as well. And I used to be so terrified that he wouldn't be able to get out of the straitjacket. And sometimes he'd be there and lying on the ground, on the wet ground, you know. And it was a hard life, but that's what people had to do in those days. But it was drama through our children's eyes, or me as a child, through my child's eyes. This was all drama. It was wonderful, and you could view it, and nobody said go home. You know, just view it. My friends and I, we thought it was great. And of course there was the swimming pool then in Dungarvan. It was an open air tidal pool, and that was magic. And that existed for many years. It was built before I was born, and it continued up into the 80s, I think the early 80s. But that was a great place, and all of the children in the town learned to swim. So there are a lot of very good swimmers from Dungarvan who learned to swim in that saltwater tidal swimming pool, and it was a great place. And
can you remember the shops in the square when you were a child?
The shops in the square, I do remember the shops in the square. I remember the shutters, as I mentioned, for the fair day. I remember one of the shops that was just off the square. It was Fennel's. They used to make knitted goods. You could order cardigans and jumpers, and my mother always ordered our woolen socks from Fennel's. And after St. Patrick's Day, we used to go into ankle socks, but from November to St. Patrick's Day, it was knee socks. And the man there, Mr. Fennel, he wore one of the high collars and a dark suit and white shirt, and it was always dim in there. And everything was kind of Dickensian. To my eyes, it was kind of Dickensian. And he had the names of all the colours, and I remember one day he said, "That's delphinium blue," and the name stuck in my mind, delphinium, and of course that's from Greece, you know, and the names of the colours, fuchsia and, terracotta, such names like that came into this dark little shop. Well, it wasn't a little shop, it was a big shop, and Mr. Fennel was so nice and so old worldly. And, and you could be sent to do the groceries with a message, and you go into, the L&N was just off the square again at the end of Mary Street, and you handed them the list, and they put them in the basket for you. And then you'd go home with that, and then you'd go to the bacon shop, to Margaret Dahill's. Margaret Dahill, she had the nicest bacon in Ireland, they said, and she only got small amounts of it. And she also had wonderful fresh eggs, because, ladies in the country, farmers' wives used to bring in eggs to her and she'd sell them. There were other shops that sold eggs and bacon too, but my mother loved Margaret Dahill, and they were great friends. So I suppose that's why Margaret stood out among all the others. And there were other shops then for vegetables. Foley's on the main street was great for vegetables, and the carrots and the bunches of carrots, and dirty carrots, and turnips and cauliflower and cabbage. And I don't remember Brussels sprouts as a child in shops, but my Uncle Mackie used to bring us in Brussels sprouts around Christmas time. He was a very good gardener, and that was where I tasted my first Brussels sprout at home, courtesy of Uncle Mackie. So I thought they were wonderful little things, like little heads of cabbage. Again, to my child's imagination, these little heads of cabbage, they were so lovely.
And what are shops like from point of view of smells? What are certain shops you'd always remember the smell? Well,
there was one shop, again off the square on the main street, Kileys, and they had black flags on the floor, and they had bins for meal, chicken feed, and so you could go in there and you get the lovely smell of grain. They were also bakers themselves, so they had lovely fresh bread. And the wall behind those bins with the black flags on the floor, the wall was whitewashed. you know, so it was lovely. Now people are going back to that now. They're putting back in the flags and they're whitewashing the walls. And they were Kileys. There was 2 Kileys sisters there, I think, and I think one of them was called Minnie. And to my reckoning, that they would have worn black, maybe a little touch of white around the collar or something like that. And there was Maloney's shop at the end of Friary Street, and that was probably the biggest grocery shop in town. And again, on the bottom of the left-hand side was where the bread was. Now they were bakers as well, and they were ship owners, and they imported coal, and they were, at one time, Maloney's were the biggest employers in the town. So that shop then, you know, sold all the food that you would need for your house. And so again, the smell of the fresh bread, and that was where I first came across hovis. And I thought that was a lovely word, hovis bread. You know, what kind of bread is it? But it was just baked to a certain recipe, and now you can get it in Lidl. I don't know if it's the same, probably not baked in the same kind of ovens, but it's very, very nice bread. And the smells in the town, the leather factory was in operation when I was a child, and at 8 o'clock in the morning and at 6 o'clock at night time the hooter went, and woo! And that was great, because the whole town knew the time without looking at their watches or clocks. And the smell of the hides and the smell, you know. We were used to it. It was part of the town. Yeah, part of the town, and so many people worked there and everything like that, and people's fathers worked there, you know. And it was, and to see the hides, and sometimes see them dripping with water. I think it was water anyway. But we used to stand outside of the factory and look in, you know, going up the lane, and it was. But children could do that. Now you'd have to have gates on the doors, or you have to have them covered. But it was great, you know. So there was a whole life there that we could explore as children of a certain age. Now I must.
Did you ever get into the creamery?
No, I used to be sent to the creamery all right for cream, and you'd bring your little jug, and you get the cream, and you went into it and went upstairs. And up there, and you said shillings, you know, or whatever amount of cream. But that was nice. That was lovely. Again, then in there, the ground, the way I remember it was cold and wet, but it had to be to keep the cream fresh, and that was part of that. But it was lovely and clean and sparse. Really nice.
And where did you go to school?
I went to school in the Mercy Convent. And that was just a block from my house. And my association with the Mercy Convent stretches over many years, because I went to school there. I started before I was 4, and my cousin Rena Kiley brought me to school. And then I went to primary school there and secondary school there. And then I taught there. I taught there for a year on Saturdays. In those days, school was on a Saturday, and I was teaching elocution. And I taught in Dublin during the week, and taught in Dungarvan on a Saturday morning in the Mercy Convent. And then I went to America, and 17 years later came back and married, and 2 children. And they went to the secondary school, which was now called, it was still called Coláiste Mhuire. And so they went in with the same uniform that I had, same colours and everything. And then I went back to teach there as well. And then the school amalgamated, and I continued to teach there. And the school uniform changed to blue. So then when our 3rd daughter came along, Rosemary, she went to school there, but the school had amalgamated and the uniform had changed. So she wore the blue uniform, which is still to this day.
With the boys' school?
No, the primary and secondary school, the presentation and the Mercy amalgamated.
Okay, because I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
Is there any difference between the presentation and the Mercy, like from point of view of Did certain families send their daughters to one school and other families sent the other?
Yeah, certain families did. If they had associations with the nuns, if they knew, or if you had a cousin, a nun in the presentation, you went to the presentation, and if you lived near the Mercy, you went to the Mercy. But sometimes, for some reason, you might go to the presentation. But they were both great schools.
But one wasn't seen as more posh than the other. Right?
Oh no.
Because in other towns,
no. And both schools were boarding schools as well. Mercy was a boarding school for a long time, since before I was born, and the presentation became a boarding school while I was in America. So it was a boarding school for so many years. How many, I don't know, but they're two great schools, and they have contributed very much to the social life of the country and the county and the town, and they've produced great students.
Yeah. And just before we leave the square, do you remember the square for any big gatherings?
I don't know if I remember this or not, but I think during on Eucharist, Corpus Christi, I think they used to have I know the procession went through the square. I don't know, I can't remember if there was an altar set up in the square or not. I don't know. But I remember the Corpus Christi going through the streets of the town. But I don't know. But John Betjeman immortalised the square, He wrote a poem called Dungarvan in the Rain. The proper title is An Irish Unionist Farewell to Greta Hellstrom, Dungarvan 1922. And it goes like this. Golden-haired and golden-hearted, I would ever have you be, as you were when last we parted, smiling, slow, and sad at me. Oh, the beating down of passion, oh, the century-seeming pain, parting in this offhand fashion, in Dungarvan, in the rain. Slanting eyes of blue, unweeping, stands my Swedish beauty, where gusts of Irish rain are sweeping round the statue in the square. Corner boys against the walling watch us furtively in vain, and the Angelus is calling through Dungarvan in the rain. Gales along the Cumra mountains, beating sleet on creaking signs. Iron gutters turned to fountains, and the windscreen laced with lines, and the evening getting later, and the ache increased again as the distance grows the greater from Dungarvan in the rain. There is no one now to wonder what eccentric sits in state as the beech trees rock and thunder round his gate lodge and his gate. Gone the ornamental plaster, gone the overgrown domain, as the car goes fast and faster from Dungarvan in the rain. Had I kissed and called you to me, had you yielded warm for cold, what a power had pounded through me as I stroked your streaming gold. You were right to keep us parted. Bound and parted we remain, aching, if unbroken-hearted. Oh, Dungarvan in the rain. Yeah.
That's excellent.
Right.
Joan, did you, I can see even from what you were saying about your love for words, and you ended up becoming an elocution teacher.
Yes.
Joel, just about that love for words and love of language, because you were talking about the shop where the man would talk about the
delphinium blue
and all
yes.
that stuff. Where did that love for language come from?
I think it's the Irish gift of the gab, and the Irish, we have a great way of expressing words and feelings and describing. We have great powers of description. Which are renowned the world over, and that's what it is. It comes from the Irish, and then we took the English language and we made it our own, And, people love listening to us. They love the story.
But for example, did your mum and dad have a grow for speaking words, or did they?
No, they were very practical.
Okay.
They were great gardeners, and they were great. They were very tidy and very organised and all that stuff. They were more droll than anything. It's my way of remembering them. A droll sense of humour.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you obviously went on to become an elocution teacher. So how did that happen?
When I went to Dublin, after I did my leaving, I did a secretarial course.
Sorry, during your leaving, was that unusual in those days?
Oh, no.
No?
No.
Okay.
Right. I did my leaving and did a secretarial course and then went to Dublin. And I was, at school I was studying elocution and I did very well in the exams. So that was one of the things I would have liked to have become, an elocution teacher or an actress or a dress designer or lots of things. But when I went to Dublin, I went to NCAD at night time. I went for 2 semesters, but I realised I wasn't the best in the class, whereas I was okay, but to make it as an artist, you have to be better than okay, you have to be splendid, you have to be great, and I knew that. But I was good at the elocution. I also went I continued with my elocution classes with Deirdre Ryan Galassi and took drama with Nora Lever. And so I got my diploma. So that's how I became an elocution teacher.
Okay. And then, would you have gone to see lots of plays and stuff?
Oh yes, yeah. It was, you're young as well. You've time to go to plays and you've time to do all of those things that you want to do and go to see everything that's on and go to see all the art galleries and, go to see the Rosk exhibition at the RDS. I saw 2 of those during the time I was in Dublin. And they've become legendary now. There people are looking back at them and saying who exhibited then and all that stuff. So that I always had a great interest in all of that. But the reading and writing and I also worked as a freelance journalist covering the Hollywood industry while I was living in Los Angeles. And I used to contribute to the Irish Times and I used to contribute a regular column to the Sunday World. I used to get a double-page spread on the industry, and so that was good. And I had access to places that other people wouldn't have because Tom, my husband, was in the business. And the fact that I was from Ireland, yes, that did open doors as well as Tom's influence. But they had to see your tear sheets, they had to see your work. And they liked my work. So, I was given access to a closed set of Charlie's Angels, and that was one of the big hit shows of time. So I've always been working with words. And I promote the gallery here, write all the press releases and everything. I also volunteer as press secretary for the fundraising part of the Helvig Lifeboat. So even if it's a small press release, you still have to pick the right words.
But just go back to tell you, how did you end up going from Dublin to America? What happened?
Because I met Tom Clancy, who was to become my husband.
Okay.
And Tom was based in America.
And where did you meet him?
I met him here in Ring, in Mooney's kitchen. The Mooneys were friends of mine, and I was visiting them, and Tom was there, and we were introduced. So that's how I met Tom Clancy.
And you were at this stage you were working in Dublin?
I was working in Dublin, and I was teaching on a Saturday in Dungarvan.
Okay, so you were down for the weekend?
Yeah.
You got to Mooney's?
Yeah.
And was it singing or something?
It was on a Saturday morning, in the daytime. They were going out on the Vega, but I couldn't go because I had to drive my Uncle Mackie home to Kilgobnet, but then I came out later and met them again. And
at that stage, did they have a reputation?
Oh yeah, they were very famous.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So you were meeting celebrities, last thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
But also, you see, Barbra Clancy was married to Myra Mooney, the eldest of the Mooney sisters. So they were family, They were related through marriage to the Mooneys in that way. as well.
Okay. And then Tom was an actor, was he?
Tom was an actor as well. He was an actor before the Clancy brothers took off, and he had co-starred on Broadway. And then when the Clancy brothers and Tommy Macon decided to take a break, and then the Clancy brothers with Bobby worked for a few years, and they decided to take a break, Tom went back to the theatre. He went back into Broadway, and he was very lucky. He went into a star-studded vehicle, A Moon for the Misbegotten, with Jason Robards and Colin Dewhurst. You know, the 3 stars of the show. There were five characters in the show, and 3 of them were starring roles. And so that was a great recognition of Tom's talent. And so that took us to Los Angeles. And we were in the music centre there, the Amundsen.
Was Jason Robards and the older man in the play?
Jason Robards, actually Tom played the father.
Oh,
Tom played, yeah. And Jason Robards played Colin Dewhurst. Colin Dewhurst and Josie. And Josie's, the character that Jason Robards played, he was after Josie.
Yes. So Eugene O'Neill.
Yes, that's right. But Tom did a lot of Eugene O'Neill plays. He had a great affinity for Eugene O'Neill. He also did Shaw and Chekhov and Shakespeare and, you know, all the classics. Plus, you know, different other genres as well.
And then obviously through Tom then you met lots of different famous people then.
I did, yeah. I met
did
lots.
any of them stand out in your head, like as regards people that were very powerful and important people, you know, in your head?
Yeah, well, before I went to Los Angeles, we used to go to the Lion's Head. In fact, I heard Ellen McCord talking on the radio yesterday, but there was somebody here and I couldn't listen. But I heard her saying the Lion's Head. It's a bar. It was a bar in New York. It's where we had our wedding reception, and Frank McCourt used to go there. They were friends of the Clancys and Malachi McCourt, and but Frank, of course, wasn't famous then. But he was writing. He was always writing, but Norman Mailer used to come into the Lion's Head, and he was one of the most famous writers in America, and Pete Hamill. You know, a lot of newspaper journalists used to come into the Lion's Head. Pete Hamill and Jack Deasy and Dennis Duggan, and then the Village Voice was at one time just right beside the Lion's Head. So the writers from the Village Voice used to go in there as well. And then, you know, a lot of people from the broadcast journalism and TV journalists and TV news people. So it was, and musicians. David Amram and Joe Heaney, the piano singer from Connemara. Tom brought him to America, and he did very well in America. He became singer in residence, artist in residence in university in Washington State. So that was a great recognition of Joe's talents as a piano singer and raconteur, both in Irish and in English. And Joe Heaney, like my father, had very tidy handwriting as well, really wonderful handwriting. And he was very nice. And it was Joe Heaney who gave us Bloneen's name. I wanted something unusual, uncommon. And so Blahaneen, but we had to anglicise it because we knew we were going to be living in America. So we called her Bloneen. And then when Raylene came along the following year, Tom said she looks like a little star. So we called her not Raylene but Raylene. And Rosemary came along then 18 years later, and so, you know, she got the lovely name of Rosemary. So, but who did we meet in America?
You lived in New York for a while.
We lived in New York for 5 years, but Tom had lived in New York before that, and Los Angeles for 12 years.
And did you like America?
Yeah, I did, but we never, excuse me, we never intended to stay there. You know, I thought 5 years, but then we couldn't come back because Tom's career was going so well, so it would be a foolish thing to come back. But, you know, but we wanted to come back before the girls got too old. So then the time presented itself, and the dollar exchange rate was good, and property prices were beginning to go up again a bit in Los Angeles, you know, plus we were selling our house. So it was a good time to move back. So we did. But we used to come to Ring every summer for the whole summer as well. So that was good, and the girls, you know, would meet their other cousins, and they would all play together, and they knew each other very well. So that was great.
And would you see much changes, like when you used to come back here, did you see it changing an awful lot? Or?
Well, we used to come back here so frequently, you really wouldn't notice, you wouldn't notice the change.
And then going to the West Coast, was that kind of full of razzmatazz, or was that?
Yeah, it was a different life. But when you're young, it's very easy to adapt, you know, so you adapt, and it was a car society, as they say, an automobile society, and you had to drive everywhere. So for the first three months I was driving with white knuckles, because I was driving on the other side of the road, you know, driving the children to school and collecting them, and, you know, driving for the groceries and all of that stuff. But you got used to it.
And would you have gone to lots of parties?
We did, yeah. We used to go to the Hollywood parties with the valley, the parking valleys and all that stuff. Yeah, you take it in your stride.
And would your children have much memory of that?
They would. They remember meeting one of the stars from Greece at a party in Malibu. You know, a Sunday afternoon soiree, and. They thought that was cool, you know, but they took it in their stride as well, because they were used to it, you know. They were only 3 and 4 when we went to Los Angeles. But, you know, when they'd see people from television, they know, but they knew as well how to behave themselves, you know. So
and they went to school there then?
They did. They went to school in Los Angeles. They went to a private school first called Country School. That was that was recommended to us by Jason Robards' wife, Lois, and then they went to Lupin Hill. That was a public school, and they went to Nestle Avenue School. That was a public school, and then they went to Our Lady Malibu School, which was a parochial school, and that was in Malibu. So they spent most years in Our Lady Malibu School, and then before we left, Blawneen spent 1 year in high school, to Woodland Hills High School, which was also run by the St. Louis, the Sisters of St. Louis. They ran Our Lady Malibu School, and they also ran Woodland Hills as well. So Louisville and Woodland Hills, that was the name of the school.
When they came back to you then, and obviously they were kind of heading into teenagers, were they in this stage?
They were going into 3rd year and 5th year respectively.
Would they have thought about the idea of moving back to America at that stage?
No, they wouldn't. They you know, they've been back for a few summers. They went back a few summers working, you know.
Okay.
And but they prefer life in Ireland.
Okay. But I suppose they have the visa. They could always do it if they wanted.
Oh, they could if they wanted to. Yeah.
And was it easy coming back then after all that?
No, because we used to come back every summer for the whole summer, so it wasn't. You know, so you were used to the changes.
Okay.
You know, so Ireland it changed gradually, but you know, every place was changing. Mm-hmm. So that wasn't a surprise at all. And we were told to expect the cold, but once you can afford central heating, you know, and good insulation, we were afraid that we might be too cold, but we weren't. We were grand.
And tell me about the gallery, because you set this up. How long ago did you set up the gallery?
1999, 2000, we started building it. So we opened it in 2000. So it's been going now for 17 years. It's over 17 years now. And Blawneen and Raylene, by that stage, you know, they were in college, and they were painting, and I had paintings downstairs, and we decided we'd extend. And we were near enough to the cliff, but we didn't want to move any closer to the cliff. So we took the roof off the room downstairs and went up. And then, not to intrude into the house space below, we built the tower to access the gallery. And the balcony out there is great, and it's lovely to have your breakfast out there on sunny mornings.
And just given the fact that it's a private gallery, have you managed to create a market for art? How is
we have our clients. Yeah, we have to work very hard because we are a private gallery, so we have to work. You know, well, every gallery has to work very hard, But then I have the help of Blonine, who hangs the shows and helps curate, and Raylene, and Rosemary. And Rosemary is in IT. She's an IT team manager, and she helps me with that aspect.
How would you try and sell things online?
No, if people want to look at our website and if they want to buy from the website, fine. But I'm very cautious. You have to be cautious.
Okay, but you do.
Like all the work that's hanging here is for sale.
Yes.
And the catalogue will tell you the prices.
And you try and get people to come along to the openings.
Yeah, we have about six openings in the year, right? And we have 2 in the summer, and we have 1 at Christmas and 1 at Easter, and we're open free at Culture, and sometimes we'll have 3 in the summer. Depends.
I was going to ask you, did you all, coming from Dungarvan, did you have Irish?
I had a certain amount of Irish. I did, yeah. I had Leaving Cert Irish.
And was it easy enough to kind of pick up then as you were living here and all that kind of stuff?
Yes, because coming back every summer for the summers, and of course it was great to speak Irish to people when you didn't want your children to hear what you were saying or to understand what you were saying. But now, of course, even my grandchildren now have Irish, because Oscar goes to school up the road here, and if I said something to you in Irish, he'd know it. So it's lovely to see that, and he's in senior infants, and Louis is in first class, and he goes to school in Coolnessmere.
So is that where they live, in Coolnessmere?
Pardon?
They live up by Coolnessmere?
No, they live up the hill here.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but Coolnessmere, Oscar, Louis is on the autistic spectrum, and they've got a special autism unit in Coolnessmere, which is wonderful.
Oh, brilliant.
It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So everyone there is so loving and positive and helpful and great, and Louis is just flourishing. He's doing very well. Wonderful.
I didn't know what you're going for concerts.
Oh yes.
But they're very friendly and very lovely, very nice acts.
Yeah. And my mother, when she was a child, and her sisters until 4th class, they went to school in Coolnessmere as well, and then they went to school in Dungarvan after that.
And come here, I'm very glad that you came home back to work.
Oh yeah, that was always the intention.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what year then did Tom go?
Tom died in November 1990. He got sick, he wasn't feeling well in April 1990, and had to drag him to the doctor, but he went, and so cancer was diagnosed, and he had a series of operations, major surgery, and he kept improving until about the 15th of August, and then after that, so it was 6 months from beginning to end, cancer. But Tom loved being here, and he loved being out in the field, and he loved looking over at the mountains, and he loved going for a walk on the beach and the Conacher and Helvig Pier and Balnagowl Pier and Balnagowl Village, and he just loved it. And of course he loved the pubs as well, Mooney's, Tigan and Murray's.
And great sing-songs.
Oh yes, yeah. That's true. There was a lot of the older people some of them have passed on now. They were there, and they would sing, and they loved the Shannon style and singing unaccompanied, and it was wonderful. It's still wonderful. The singing talent and the performing talent and the musical talent that's here in Ring today is phenomenal, absolutely. And there are music classes going on, and my grandchildren go to them. But there's the kids who've come up through the school system with the music and with the culture and the songs and the spoken word, they're just so well educated, and they're so confident, and they go to university and they go out into the world, to all parts of the world, and bring this with them, and it's a wonderful legacy to have, and to have it in the hands of this young generation. It's very healthy in their hands.
So you're very confident about our future, our cultural future.
Oh yes, yeah. never so more as today, because with the internet and everything too, it can be like we had a group of people here on Sunday afternoon from Boston University, from Northwest University in Boston, and they're over here, you know, they're learning about Irish culture, and they were staying up at the Coláiste na Ringe for a week before travelling to Dublin for a week and somewhere else in Ireland or other parts of Ireland for another week. But they're here to learn Irish. So that was lovely to have them visit.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, Joan, thanks for it. It's really, really great for us to kind of get all these different angles to the story, and